our egoism. It would be terrible if Christ were to be so understood that the words of Paul, "Not I, but Christ in me," served only to encourage a higher egoism. Christ died for the whole of humanity, for the humanity of the earth. Christ became the central spirit of the earth, who has to save for the earth the spiritual earthly elements that flow out from man. Nowadays, one can read theological works, and those who have read them will bear me out, which assure us that certain theologians of the 19th and 20th centuries have at last disposed of the popular medieval belief that Christ came to earth in order to snatch the earth from the devil, to snatch the earth from Lucifer. Within modern theology, there is an enlightened, in quotes, materialism, which will not recognize itself as such, but on the contrary imagines itself to be especially enlightened. It says, quote, "In the dark Middle Ages, people said that Christ appeared in the world because he had to snatch the earth away from the devil," close quote. But the true explanation leads us back to this simple popular belief. For everything on the earth that is not set free by Christ belongs to Lucifer. All that is human in us, all that is more than what is merely confined in our ego, is ennobled, is made fruitful for the whole of humanity when it is permeated with Christ. And now, at the end of our considerations during the last few days, I would not like to conclude without saying these further words to each single one of the souls who are gathered together here. Hope and confidence in the future of our work can dwell in our hearts, because we have endeavored from the very beginning to fill what we had to say with the will of Christ. And this hope and confidence may allow us to say that our teaching is itself what Christ has wished to say to us, in fulfillment of his words, quote, "I am with you always, even to the end of the earth ages," close quote. We have wished to be mindful only of what comes from him, and all that he has inspired us with, according to his promise, we want to take into our souls as our spiritual science. It is not because we feel our spiritual science to be imbued with any sort of Christian dogmatism that we regard it as Christian, but because, having Christ within us, we look on it as a revelation of the Spirit in ourselves. I am therefore also convinced that the springing up of true spiritual science in those souls who want to receive with us our Christ-filled spiritual science will be fruitful for the whole of humanity, and especially for those who welcome these fruits. Clairvoyant observation shows that much of what is good, spiritually good in our movement, proceeds from those who have taken our Christian spiritual science into themselves, and then, having passed through the gate of death, send down to us the fruits of this Christian spiritual science. The Christian spiritual science which those souls have taken into themselves and are now sending down to us from the spiritual worlds is already living in us. For they do not keep it in their own karmic stream for the sake of their own perfecting. They can let it stream into those who want to receive it. Comfort and hope arise for our spiritual science when we know that our so-called dead are working with us. In the second lecture, we spoke about these things in a certain connection, but today, when we have come to the close of the course, I should like to add a personal word. While I have been speaking to the Norrköping branch of our society, I could not be other than conscious always of the spirit of one who was so closely connected with us here. The spirit of Frau Danielson looks down like a good angel on all that this branch wants to undertake. Hers also was a Christian spirit in the sense described, and the souls who knew her will never feel themselves separated from her. May that spirit hover as guardian spirit over this branch. Most willingly and surely will it do so, if the souls who work in this branch receive it. With these words, spoken from the depths of my heart, I close these lectures. And I hope that we will continue to work together on the spiritual path we have embraced. That's the end of Lecture 4 of Christ and the Human Soul, a small cycle by Rudolf Steiner, from Collected Works, Volume 155.
As an athlete, you want to keep evolving. I think it applies off the field too. You want to get inspiration from a lot of things and try different fits that fit you. I want people to know I have no stylist. That's strictly me.
Country bagels and gravy egg sandwich. Your new favorite meal on the go. It's Sunside Bros Bagels.
Okay. This is a new recording of the book Theosophy by Rudolf Steiner. It is, in a sense, the 30th anniversary of my first reading of this. And I'll begin with the introduction. In the autumn of 1813, the German philosopher Johann Gottlieb Fichte published his titled Science of Knowledge, the mature fruit of a lifetime wholly dedicated to the service of truth. At the very beginning of this work, he wrote, quote, "This doctrine presupposes the existence of a quite new inner sensory instrument through which a new world is opened up, a world that simply does not exist for the ordinary person." Close quote. Fichte then showed by means of a comparison how incomprehensible this doctrine would be to anyone who insists on judging it on the basis of what our ordinary senses present. Quote, "Imagine a world of people all born blind. They can only know about the existence and interrelationships of things that exist with a sense of touch. If you talk to them about colors and about other relationships that exist only through light and the sense of sight, you might as well be saying nothing at all. If you are lucky, they will inform you of this fact so that you notice your error and can at least refrain from further useless talk if you prove incapable of opening their eyes." Close quote. Footnote number 1. Johann Gottlieb Fichte, 1762 to 1814, from title Introductory Lectures on the Theory of Science, Transcendental Logic, and the Facts of Consciousness, close quote, given at the University of Berlin, 1812 to 1813, published posthumously by I. H. Fichte in 1834. End of footnote. All too often, someone trying to talk to people about things such as those mentioned by Fichte is in a position similar to that of a seeing person among the blind. Yet it is precisely these things that are of relevance to the true nature and highest goals of human beings, and anyone who really believed it necessary to, quote, refrain from further useless talk, close quote, would have to give up on humanity in despair. But we must not doubt for a single moment that it is possible to open the eyes of any person who responds to these things with goodwill. This has always been the assumption of people who wrote and spoke out of feeling their own, quote, inner sensory instrument, close quote, maturing within them, and were thus able to recognize the true nature of the human being, which is hidden from the outer senses. This is why a hidden wisdom has been spoken of since time immemorial. Those who have grasped something of this hidden wisdom are as secure in their possession of it as people with normal eyes are in their ability to visualize color. Thus they need no proof of it. They also know that no proof is needed for anyone whose higher sense, like their own, has been opened. They can speak to such a person, such as a traveler might speak about a foreign country to people who have never been there personally, but who can imagine it because they would see the very same things given the opportunity. However, those capable of observing the super-sensible world should speak not only to spiritual researchers, but to everyone, since what they have to tell concerns each one of us. In fact, they know that without some knowledge of these things, no one can be human in the true sense of the word. They speak to all of us, knowing that what they have to say will be met with varying degrees of understanding, but also knowing that since a feeling for the truth and the ability to understand it are present in every human being, even those who are still far from being able to conduct spiritual research on their own may be able to respond with understanding. This understanding, which can light up in any healthy human soul, is what spiritual researchers address first, and they know that it has a power that must gradually lead to the higher stages of knowledge. This feeling for truth stirs in the darkness. Although it may at first see absolutely nothing of what is described, it is the magician who opens, quote, the eye of the spirit, close quote. The soul does not yet see, but this feeling allows the power of truth to take hold of it, so that truth then gradually draws near the soul and opens its higher sense. This may take more time or less, depending on the individual, but anyone with patience and perseverance will reach this goal. For although not every person born physically blind can be successfully operated on, every spiritual eye, EYE, can be opened. When it will be opened is simply a question of time. Neither academic learning nor scientific training is a prerequisite for opening this higher sense. It can open up for a naive and uneducated person as readily as for a renowned scientist. In fact, what is nowadays often considered the one and only science is more likely to be a hindrance than a help on the way to this goal, because it characteristically accepts as quote-unquote real only what is accessible to our ordinary senses. However great the successes of science in understanding sense-perceptible reality may be, when it takes what is both necessary and beneficial in its own realm as the standard for all human knowledge, it creates a profusion of prejudices that block our access to higher realities. The objection is often raised that human knowledge has been set, quote, insurmountable limits, close quote, once and for all, which cannot be transcended, and any knowledge that disregards them must be rejected out of hand. Anyone who claims such knowledge is considered highly presumptuous. This objection totally fails to take into account the fact that higher knowledge can come about only if a development of human cognitive powers precedes it. What lies outside the limits of human knowledge prior to this development lies well within them once the faculties that lie dormant in each individual have been awakened. One point should not be overlooked, however. We could ask what good it does to talk to people about things for which their cognitive faculties are not yet awakened and that are therefore inaccessible to them. However, this is not the right way to look at the issue. We do need certain faculties in order to discover the kinds of things we are talking about. But if these ideas, once discovered, are shared and made known to others, they can be understood by anyone willing to apply impartial logic and a healthy feeling for the truth. To individuals who allow open, unbiased thinking and an unhampered independent feeling for the truth to work freely within them, this book presents only things that offer a satisfying and convincing approach to the riddles of human life and the phenomena of the world around us. Ask yourselves this question: if the statements made in this book are true, do they offer a convincing explanation of life? You will find that the life of every human being offers confirmation that they do. In order to be a quote-unquote teacher in these higher regions of existence, however, having acquired the faculty for perceiving them is not enough. Systematic knowledge belongs here as much as it does to the profession of teaching on the level of ordinary reality. Quote, higher seeing, close quote, does not make a person a knower in the spirit any more than healthy senses make a scholar in sense-perceptible reality. But in truth, all reality is one. Since the lower reality and the higher spiritual reality are merely two sides of one and the same fundamental unity of being, a person who is ignorant with regard to lower knowledge will probably remain similarly ignorant of higher things. This basic fact calls up a feeling of boundless responsibility in those who, through a spiritual calling, feel obliged to speak out about spiritual regions of existence. It impresses on them the need for humility and restraint. It should not, however, discourage anyone from looking into higher truths, not even someone whose everyday life offers no opportunity to study the ordinary sciences. It is quite possible to fulfill our tasks as human beings without understanding anything about botany, zoology, mathematics, or other sciences. But it is not possible to be, quote, human, close quote, in the fullest sense of the word, without coming closer in some way to the essential nature and destiny of the human being as revealed through knowledge of the supersensible world. As human beings, we call the highest thing we can look up to, quote, the divine, close quote. And we must imagine that our highest aim and calling have something to do with this divine element. This may well be why wisdom that transcends the sense-perceptible world, that reveals to us both our essential nature and our destiny, is called theosophy, or, quote, divine wisdom, close quote. The name, quote, spiritual science, close quote, can be given to the observation of spiritual processes in human life and in the cosmos. If, as has been done in this book, we extract from spiritual science the phenomena pertaining especially to the essential spiritual core of the human being, then we can use the term theosophy for this particular subject area, since it has been applied in this sense for centuries. The above viewpoint provided the basis for developing this outline of the theosophical worldview. Its author has included nothing that is not fact and reality for him, in the same sense that events in the outer world are facts and realities for our eyes, ears, and ordinary understanding. Here, we are dealing with experiences that become accessible to anyone determined to set off on the path to knowledge described in the last chapter of this book. We approach the things of the supersensible world with the right attitude if we take it as a given that sound thinking and perception are capable of understanding all true knowledge that can flow toward us from the higher worlds. We should also recognize that by taking this kind of understanding as our starting point and laying a firm foundation with it, we are taking a great and important first step toward higher seeing for ourselves, although other things must also contribute if we are to achieve this goal. However, if we scorn this approach and try to reach the higher worlds by other means alone, we bar the door to true higher knowledge. If, on principle, we admit the existence of higher worlds only once we have seen them for ourselves, this in itself is an obstacle to ever being able to see them. But being determined to use sound thinking to understand first what we will later be able to observe actually fosters this seeing. It summons up important forces of the soul that lead to this seership. The end of the introduction to Theosophy. This is a reading of the book Theosophy by Rudolf Steiner, a new recording. This is Chapter 1, The Essential Nature of the Human Being. The following words by Goethe beautifully characterize the starting point of one of the paths that lead to being able to recognize the true nature of the human being. Quote, "As soon as we become aware of the objects around us, we start to consider them in relationship to ourselves, and rightly so, because our fate depends entirely on whether they please or displease, attract or repel, help or harm us. This very natural way of looking at and assessing things appears to be as easy as it is necessary, yet it exposes us to thousands of errors that often put us to shame and make our lives miserable. We undertake a much harder task when, in our keen desire for knowledge, we strive to observe natural objects in and for themselves, and in their relationship to one another. For we soon feel the lack of the standard of liking and disliking, attraction and repulsion, usefulness and harmfulness that came to our aid when we were considering objects in relation to our human selves. We are forced to renounce this standard totally, and as dispassionate and quasi-divine beings, to seek out and examine what is, and not what pleases us. This means that neither the beauty nor the usefulness of any plant should move true botanists, who rather should study its morphology and its relationships to the rest of the plant kingdom. Just as the sun shines equally on all plants and entices them forth, so too should botanists observe and survey them all impartially and take the data and standards for their assessment not from the human domain, but from the domain of the things under observation." Close quote, footnote number 1, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, 1749 to 1832, German poet, dramatist, novelist, and scientist, from Goethe's treatise titled Der Versuch als Vermittler von Object und Subject. Quote, "The Experiment as Mediator between Object and Subject," 1793, and this is from Scientific Studies, Johann Wolfgang Goethe, editor and translator, Douglas Miller, New York, Suhrkamp Publishers, 1988, end of footnote. Goethe's thoughts draw our attention to three different kinds of things. First, the objects we constantly receive information about through the gateways of our senses, the things we touch, taste, smell, hear, and see. Second, the impressions they make on us, which assume the character of liking or disliking, desire or disgust, by virtue of the fact that we react sympathetically to one thing and are repelled by another, or find one thing useful and another harmful. And third, the knowledge we, quote, quasi-divine beings, close quote, acquire about the objects as they tell us the secrets of what they are and how they work. These three domains are distinctly separate in human life. So we become aware that we are bound up with the world in three different ways. The first way is something we encounter and accept as a given fact. Through the second way, we turn the world into something that concerns us and has significance for us. The third way, we hold as a goal to strive for unceasingly. Why does the world appear to us in this threefold manner? A simple example can make it clear. Suppose I walk through a field where wildflowers are blooming. The flowers reveal their colors to me through my eyes. That is the fact I accept as given. When I then take pleasure in the wonderful display of colors, I am turning the fact into something that concerns me personally. That is, by means of my feelings, I relate the flowers to my own existence. A year later, when I go back to the same field, new flowers are there, and they arouse new joy in me. The previous year's enjoyment rises up as a memory. It is present in me, although the object that prompted it in the first place is gone. And yet the flowers I am now seeing are of the same species as last year's, and have grown in accordance with the same laws. If I am familiar with this species and these laws, I will recognize them again in this year's flowers, just as I did in last year's. On reflection, I may realize that since last year's flowers are gone, my enjoyment of them remains only in my memory. It is bound up with my personal existence alone. But what I recognized in the flowers, both last year and this year, will remain as long as such flowers grow. It is something that is revealed to me, but is not dependent on my existence in the same way that my enjoyment is. My feelings of pleasure remain within me, while the laws, the essence of the flowers, exist in the world outside of me. Thus, as human beings, we are constantly linking ourselves to the things of the world in a threefold way. Parenthesis, we should not read anything into this fact at first, but simply take it as it stands. Close parenthesis. It shows us that there are three aspects to our human nature. For the moment, this and only this is what will be meant here by the three terms, body, soul, and spirit. Associating any preconceived ideas or even hypotheses with these words will cause us to misunderstand the discussion that follows. By body is meant the means by which the things in our environment, such as the wild flowers in the example above, reveal themselves to us. The word soul designates the means by which we link these things to our own personal existence, by which we experience likes and dislikes, pleasure and displeasure, joy and sorrow. By spirit is meant what becomes apparent in us when, as, quote, quasi-divine beings, close quote, to use Goethe's expression, we look at the things of the world. In this sense, each person consists of body, soul, and spirit. Through the body, we are capable of linking ourselves for the moment to things outside us. Through the soul, we preserve the impressions things make on us. Through the spirit, what the things themselves contain is disclosed to us. Only when we look at a human being from these three sides can we hope to understand our true nature. For these three sides show us that we are related to the rest of the world in a threefold way. Through the body, we are related to the things that present themselves to our senses from outside. The substances of the outer world make up the body, and the forces of the outer world are active in it. We can observe our own bodily existence with our senses, just as we observe the things of the outside world. But it is not possible to observe our soul existence in the same way. With my bodily senses, I can observe the whole range of bodily processes taking place in me, but neither I nor anyone else can perceive my likes and dislikes or my joys and sorrows with bodily senses. The domain of the soul is inaccessible to bodily perception. Our bodily existence is there for all to see, but we carry our soul existence inside us as our own private world. Through the Spirit, however, the outer world is revealed to us in a higher way. Although it is true that the secrets of the outer world disclose themselves inside us, in the Spirit we step outside of ourselves and let the things themselves tell us what is significant for them rather than for us. When we look up at the starry sky, the soul's experience of delight belongs to us. But the eternal laws of the stars, which we may grasp in thought and in spirit, do not belong to us. They belong to the stars. Thus, as human beings, we are citizens of three worlds. In body, we both belong to and perceive the outer world. In soul, we build up our own inner world. And in spirit, a third world that is higher than both of the others reveals itself to us. It should be apparent that because of the fundamental differences between these three worlds, we will achieve a clear understanding of them and of our own part in them only by applying three different modes of observation. Part 1. The bodily nature of the human being. We learn about the human body by means of our bodily senses, and our mode of observation can be no different than if we were learning about other sense-perceptible things. We can observe the human being in the same way that we observe minerals, plants, and animals, and as human beings we are related to these three other forms of existence. Like the minerals, we build up our bodies out of natural substances. Like the plants, we grow and reproduce. Like the animals, we perceive the objects around us and develop inner experiences based on the impressions they make on us. Therefore, we may attribute a mineral, a plant, and an animal existence to the human being. The structural differences between minerals, plants, and animals correspond to their three modes of existence. Their structure, or gestalt, form, is what we can perceive with our senses, and this alone is what may be called, quote, the body, close quote. The human body, however, is different from the animal body. We all recognize this difference, no matter what we may think about how humans are related to animals. Even the most radical materialist, who denies the existence of anything having to do with the soul, would be hard put to disagree with the following statement by Carus in his title Organon of the Knowledge of Nature and the Spirit. Quote, even though the most delicate inner construction of the nervous system, and especially of the brain, remains an unsolved riddle for physiologists and anatomists, it is an undisputed fact that the concentration of its structures increases in the higher orders of animals, reaching in the human being a level not to be found in any other creature. This fact, of the greatest significance with regard to human intellectual development, may in itself be sufficient to explain that development. Therefore, when the structure of the brain has not developed properly, and shows itself to be small and inadequate, as in the case in microcephalics and idiots, it goes without saying that we can no more expect to find understanding and the appearance of original ideas than we can expect the continuation of the species to be accomplished by individuals with totally deformed reproductive organs. In contrast, although it may not in itself guarantee genius, the strong and beautifully developed structure of the whole person, and of the brain in particular, is at least the first and indispensable prerequisite of higher knowledge. Close quote. Footnote number 2, Carl Gustav Carus, 1789 to 1869, German naturalist, physician, psychologist, and landscape painter, from the chapter on knowledge in Organon der Erkenntnis der Natur und des Geistes. Leipzig, 1856, page 89 forward. End of footnote. Just as we attribute mineral, plant, and animal modes of existence to the human body, we must also attribute to it a fourth and distinctively human mode. Through the mineral mode of existence, we are related to everything visible. Through the plant-like mode, to everything that grows and reproduces. And through the animal mode, to all creatures that perceive their environment and have inner experiences based on outer perceptions. But through the human mode, even with regard to the physical body, we make up a kingdom that is ours alone. Part 2. The soul nature of the human being. As an individual, private inner world, soul nature is different from bodily nature. Its intrinsic privateness becomes apparent as soon as we turn our attention to the simplest act of sensing. We cannot know whether or not others experience this simple sensation in exactly the same way. We know that some people are colorblind and experience things only in different shades of gray, while others are partially colorblind and cannot perceive certain gradations of color. The image of the world that their eyes provide is different from that of a so-called normal person. The same applies to the other senses too, more or less. This is already enough to demonstrate that even a simple sensation belongs to the private inner world. With my bodily senses, I can perceive the same red table that someone else perceives, but I cannot perceive that person's sensation of red. Therefore, we must describe this sensation as belonging to the soul. Once we are quite clear about this, we will stop looking at inner experiences as mere brain processes or something of that sort. Feeling follows closely on sensation, with one sensation arousing pleasure in us and another displeasure. These are the stirrings of our inner soul life. We each create an inner world of feelings in addition to the world that works in on us from outside. Then there is a third factor, our will, through which we work back upon the outside world, leaving the imprint of our own inner being on it. In will activity, the soul flows outward in a sense. The fact that our actions bear the stamp of our inner life distinguishes them from natural events taking place in the outer world. In this way, the soul sets itself up as something personal and